again, and welcome back to the podcast. I am Mason.
And this is Ian.
And we are covering the NFL Championship Sunday. All right, the first game that we had was the Rams against the Saints. And traveling down to New Orleans, it was already going to be a tough battle. This one goes into overtime off of an interesting no call that we're going to talk about later in the show. But the Rams eventually prevail 26-23. Jared Goff had a good day, 25 of 40 for 297 yards, one touchdown and one pick that wasn't really his fault. Rushing yards, C.J. Anderson again led the way, 16 carries, 44 yards. Todd Gurley only had 10 yards on 4 carries. Receiving-wise, Brandon Cooks, 7 catches, 107 yards. It was an okay day for the Rams. On the other side, Drew Brees, 26 of 40, 249, 2 touchdowns and a pick. Ugly, ugly pick that sealed the game. Rushing, Mark Ingram led, 9 carries, 31 yards. And receiving was led by Alvin Kamara, 11 receptions, 96 yards. This is going to bring us into our first segment called the 3-point stance. And this is where we're going to give you 3 points from the games so you can talk about it around the water cooler. So my first point is 3 is more than 7. And that's referring to the Rams stopping the Saints on 2 early drives that should have been touchdowns that ended up becoming field goals. And honestly, that was a huge part of the game. The Rams keeping the Saints out of the end zone saved their playoff hopes. Because if the Saints get those 2 touchdowns and then the touchdown later, that's a 21-0 lead. The game is over at that point.
Yeah, but because they allowed themselves to only take the points, even though they were right there in the red zone, twice they allowed the Rams to get back into this game when they really should not have.
Yeah, the Rams looked discombobulated on offense. The defense looked goodish. They stopped them in the red zone, but it wasn't. They looked like their spirits could have been broken, and the Saints just couldn't finish them off, and that was a big part of it. My second point, Aaron Donald and Ndamukong Suh are kind of good. This whole season, we've been talking about how bad the Rams' run defense was. It was, 29th in the league? Something atrocious.
One of the worst, yes.
Yeah. They held the Saints to 48 rushing yards. Mark Ingram had 31 yards and led the team. Alvin Kamara finished with 15 yards. After that, you had Zach Line with 4 yards, Taysom Hill with 0, and Drew Brees with -2. Ugly, ugly running game for the Saints. That has been really their focal point of offense this entire year.
Yeah, and what I can tell from this is it kind of looks like the 7-9 Saints for how many seasons in a row? Because now if you eliminate the run game for the Saints, it goes back to the game only being on Drew Brees. And he's getting older, and you're starting to tell that he's getting used to, I can just throw it to Kamara here, or, Kamara can run up the middle, or even Ingram, and maybe that third-string backup quarterback that we put in all the time.
Exactly. And that actually brings me into my third point. Drew Brees needs receivers. New Orleans wide receivers combined for 109 yards. That's it. Their leading receiver was Alvin Kamara. After that is Ted Ginn with 3 catches for 58 yards, which sounds okay, but one of those was a 43-yard catch. So after that is 2 catches, 15 yards. Michael Thomas had 36 yards, and after that is a pair of tight ends and Traquan Smith. It's pathetic. Drew Brees has no real receivers on this team, and he still makes these incredible seasons happen.
That's what he's always done, is he always makes anybody look great or better than what they are. And the problem is that every time they have a decent receiver, they ship him off for whatever round pick they can get. Like one of his best receivers, Brandon Cooks, was on the Rams, and he used to be on the Saints. Imagine if y'all had him and Michael Thomas still. Different team.
That was a storyline that I thought was a little underreported coming in, because Brandon Cooks was one of their better receivers over the past half decade, and they just shipped him off for a first-round pick to the Patriots. And now
Patriots shipped him off.
Yeah. And then
now he's in a Super Bowl.
And now he comes in and gets the win with the Rams. So what are your 3 points?
My 3 points for the Rams-Saints game are that kickers are needed. And I know that kind of goes against your 3 is more than 7, but...
You mean 7 is more than 3.
Yeah, that's how math works, I think. Yeah. But in overtime, after the Saints had that bad pick, they didn't necessarily have to worry about getting too close for field goal range because they knew that Greg the Leg Zuerlein kicked it from 57-yarders at the end of regulation almost, and that helped keep them in the game. So that's my first point.
And you know that Pepsi commercial they've been airing where Ron Rivera ices the kicker? All right, that's a Saints kicker. You look at the helmet, that's the Saints. And then they tried to ice Greg the Leg twice in that game. It didn't work. I thought that was kind of ironic and funny. They would play that commercial in between the overtimes. It kind of came back to be a little ironic.
And as for my second point, is refs suck. There's so many calls that it's like they should have had, and then the other time it's like, well, why didn't they call that? Or wait, they should call this. It's just reffing is getting to a confusing point, I think more so than it has been in recent years.
And, a lot of the rules were changed over the offseason to make reffing a little easier and make the rules a little more simplistic so that fans could follow along. But it's not even that the rules are complicated. It's that the reffing is inconsistent. We're seeing refs come in and call one thing on one play, and then on the next play, there's nothing. And, of course, this is where everyone wants us to talk about the missed pass interference call that could have won the Saints the game. I thought that was a horrible missed call.
Oh, it was definitely a missed call.
When you watch it in slow-mo and from all these angles, it looks like a horrible missed call.
You don't even have to watch it in slow-mo.
I was saying, when you watch it in real time, it doesn't look as bad, though. And so I can understand why they would miss it, but at the same time, it's something you've been trained to do and to perform at the highest level. You can't miss a call that big in the game.
And I know a lot of Saints fans will probably think, well, that lost us the game. Your team had chances to score beforehand. The game shouldn't come down to one play, in my opinion.
You won the coin toss in overtime.
You should have won then.
Exactly. You scored 13 points in your first 3 drives, and then after that you managed, 10 for the rest of the game?
You let the Rams get back because you let their punter throw the football on 4th down, and that changed that Rams team.
That gave them momentum because they couldn't stomp them out.
And as for my last point, kind of branching off of that, is overtime needs to be changed. I am sick and tired of it only being one possession in the end. I would like something more similar to college, where at least both teams get a chance.
I have always said that college overtime is the better of the 2 overtimes. It's more exciting. You're automatically in scoring position. It's way more of a thrill ride. And as someone who watched and sat through Super Bowl 51, we need to change the overtime rules and go back and change the results of some Super Bowls. All right?
It can't happen. I want it, but it can't happen.
Change some results of Super Bowls.
The past is the past. Let's not.
Anyways, speaking of overtime, did you hear there was another overtime game on Championship Sunday?
Really?
The Patriots and the Chiefs. This is the first time in NFL history that both championship games have gone to overtime on the same day. The Patriots ended up coming out on top 37-31. Tom Brady was his normal self, 30 of 46, 348 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 picks, which was odd. The star of the game, Sony Michel, 29 carries, 113 yards, and 2 touchdowns. And Julian Edelman, always consistent, 7 catches, 96 yards. He looked good for most of the game. On the other side, Patrick Mahomes, the probable league MVP, was 16 of 31, 295 yards, 3 touchdowns. Damian Williams, 10 carries, 30 yards, and a touchdown. Sammy Watkins led the way on receiving with 4 catches for 114 yards. And so to start us off, my first point, Mahomes is boom or bust. And we've talked about Mahomes and how great he is. We see him throw these 5,000 yard seasons, the 50 touchdowns. But we saw a lot in this game where he looked like a rookie, and every play was either a big play one way or a big play the other. Let me give you a small stat. He had 4 sacks in the game. Do you know how many yards he lost on them?
I believe it's close to 20.
46 yards on the 4 sacks combined.
Ooh.
And there was one that was like a sack for a loss of 1. He loses huge yards on these scrambles that aren't working. And so when he goes against these fast edge rushers or fast interior guys that can catch him, he's losing chunk yards. In the one of the Chiefs' first or second drives, they got into field goal range. And then Patrick Mahomes tried to scramble around and actually got them out of field goal range to the point where they had to punt because of the way he scrambles. So we've talked about the way that he can change games with like this boom of explosiveness, but he can also cost the Chiefs some costly points.
Yeah, but it's both of those things at the same time. And that's something that is just, I think, a little bit of the rookie nerves, and also, well, he's not a rookie, he's his second year, but his first full season playing. And his first time in the playoffs, his first time against the Patriots in the playoff, in the championship game, I think even though he probably will claim that he didn't have any nerves, he was thinking, I can do what I did during the regular season and run around and make these great throws, but this time they have consequences.
Absolutely, and part of it is just him being a rookie, but Also, no one's talking about how he cost the Chiefs those 3 points that ultimately ended up being 3 that they desperately needed to stay in this game.
Because we know Harrison Butker would have made it.
Yeah. My second point, the Chiefs miss Marcus Peters. So when you look at the Patriots receiving stats, Julian Edelman, of course, had 96. Chris Hogan had 45. Dorsett had 29. And it's not necessarily about the yards as much as it is the coverage. You saw constantly the Patriots were just hitting 10-yard quick outs with all their receivers. Marcus Peters is more of a big guy, a little more physical, and you have to believe he could at least make 1 or 2 stops there when the Chiefs really needed it the most. I mean, they finished with like the 29th best defense in the
I
league.
think it was 31st. It's even worse. You're giving them too much credit.
It was atrocious. They really needed a stud defensive player to come up and win the game for them, and they couldn't get it.
No, the only stud defensive player they had is Eric Berry, and he was injured weeks before. Andy Reid neglects his defense just so he can have a high-powered offense, and it's starting to show.
And even Eric Berry got a little burned against Gronk, and we didn't see Justin Houston at all in this game. It was just a bad game defensively, and you have to feel like if they still had Marcus Peters, they could have won this game.
They actually did get a pick on defense, but they didn't do anything with it on offense. So the one time that they did do something and stop the Patriots in the red zone, it was for nothing.
Exactly. And last point, the officials were heavily involved in this game, but they were right to be heavily involved. There were a lot of very key, critical calls that needed to be reviewed. And don't talk with me about pace of play, the pace of the game. These are professionals. They know what they're doing. So, there was the Julian Edelman call where he didn't touch the ball. There was the Chris Hogan one-handed catch that he brought into his body that would not have been a catch last year, but this year was. And then there was the other Chris Hogan catch on the sideline on the out where he was able to just reel it in. That was called no catch. So the official may have been heavily involved, but it was needed. It was some critical moments in the game.
Yeah, and those catches, or one no catch, they needed to be looked at just in case, because that way you can't have any doubt in anyone's mind saying, well, that wasn't really a catch. And it's starting to become a custom. Whenever you see a team is like, oh, did we catch that? They always hurry up. And whenever the people upstairs see that the team's hurrying up, they're like, all right, we need to check that out. And it's better for the game, I think, in total, because it makes the right person win, even if we don't want them to win.
And I think a lot of it could have been influenced from the Rams-Saints game. And they watched that blown pass interference call. So now you're thinking, we have to get everything right, or else it's going to be talked about for weeks leading up to the Super Bowl.
It's already going to be talked about for weeks.
Exactly. But you don't want anything of that from your crew.
At least the AFC crew, I don't think, screwed up too much. They didn't have one big call that would have changed the game.
No. What's your 3 points?
My 3 points is, when will Tom Brady retire? It's more of a question than anything. I want him gone. I hope this is his last ride. I hope Jared Goff can end it in Atlanta, and he'll retire without another ring.
Well, Tom Brady's first ring came against a high-powered Rams offense in the Super Bowl. It was not 31. It was one of the earlier ones. I don't remember the exact number, but he ended up winning it with Adam Vinatieri's long field goal. So it almost feels like this is full circle for him, and it's a little scary.
My second point is Andy Reid a good coach? I know that he is offensive-minded and can score, as we saw with Patrick Mahomes almost all season, excluding last game. They were close, but he almost seems more like an offensive coordinator than a head coach because he's not completely around that team.
I would say he is a good coach, but he's not necessarily clutch because he's coached top units on both sides of the ball. You remember back like the first year Alex Smith was there. They ran the ball a lot, and they played solid defense with Tamba Hawley, Donateri Poe, Justin Houston, Derek Johnson. They were a solid defensive team that just ran the ball out and won games 10-9. So he's coached both sides to great heights, the defense and then obviously the offense this year. He's a good coach. He just struggles as soon as you get into the postseason. His postseason record speaks for itself.
Yes. And my last one is, are the Chiefs cursed? Because they always seem to make it into these playoffs. They made it farther this time than they have in previous years, but they just seem to take up a slot and then lose it.
That's a really good question. And I'm a little bit of a skeptic when it comes to curses, but it's starting to seem like things have been going against them recently. But I don't even know if that's as much the Chiefs as it is the Patriots. because we know when Jordan was in the NBA in the 90s, it's not that any of the teams in the East were bad. They were really good teams with some stud players, some Hall of Fame level players. It's just that Jordan was that good that no one else got a chance. And we've seen the Patriots in the Chiefs' runs this year, of course. A few years ago with Alex Smith, they had to go up to New England and lost. It's really more that the Patriots have been a dynasty more than the Chiefs are cursed, I think. And a fun fact about the Patriots, the last time we didn't see them in a Super Bowl, Peyton Manning was still playing. That was Super Bowl 50, all the way back in 2016.
Yep.
It's been 3 years since the Patriots have been out of the Super Bowl. So those are our 3 points about the NFL Championship weekend. Tell us what you want us to cover, and why don't you leave some podcast names for us to discuss.
We're in desperate need.
Next week, we will be talking about the all-important culmination.
What was that?
We'll be talking about the most important game of the season.
The Pro Bowl!
The Pro Bowl! No, we will be giving you a Super Bowl breakdown, looking at positions, wide receivers, and cornerbacks, and telling you who we think is going to win. So make sure you tune in next week when we may or may not have a name. I'm Mason.
And this is Ian.
Thanks for listening.